My husband ran off with an 18-year-old mistress, and now he wants half my business. It was just another Tuesday, or so it seemed. My salon was bustling with clients, their laughter and chatter blending with the gentle hum of hair dryers. I was finishing up a balayage when my phone buzzed on the counter. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Jack, my husband. The words etched themselves into my mind instantly. I'm leaving. Tiffany and I are starting fresh. Don't try to stop me. I took what's mine. Tiffany. The name landed like a slap. 18, barely out of high school, and now, apparently, the woman Jack had left me for. The betrayal burned, but I felt no tears. Instead, a strange, cold clarity settled over me. Years of love, shared dreams, and sacrifices, all discarded for a fling. And worse, he'd taken all the money from our joint account, leaving me with the scraps of what we'd built together. Still, I kept my composure. My client didn't suspect a thing as I finished her hair with the same precision and care as always. I'd learned long ago to mask my emotions behind a professional smile. Once she left, though, I retreated to the back room, replaying the last few months in my head, connecting dots I'd ignored for too long. It started subtly. Late nights at the office, unexplained expenses, and the sudden appearance of passwords on his phone. Jack had always been careful, but not careful enough. 2 months ago, I'd stumbled upon a dinner receipt for two from a high-end steakhouse. The kicker? That night, he told me he was working late. It wasn't the only red flag, and I wasn't naive. Instead of confronting him, I prepared. The first thing I did was open a separate bank account. I'd siphoned off small amounts from our joint funds, just enough to avoid raising suspicion. Then, I quietly consulted a lawyer who assured me that our state's divorce laws favored the wronged party. I'd even started documenting everything: the receipts, the late-night excuses, and the inconsistencies in his stories. It was all there, ready to be used when the time came. And now the time had come. As the workday wound down, I stared out the window at the city streets, buzzing with life and oblivious to my turmoil. My coworkers, people I'd worked alongside for years, chatted about weekend plans, oblivious to the storm brewing in my life. It was almost surreal, this normalcy surrounding me while my marriage crumbled. But I didn't let it show. If Jack thought he'd blindsided me, he was in for a surprise. When the last client left, I locked the salon doors and sat down to map out my next steps. The first was securing my finances. I transferred what little was left in our account into my private one. Then, I logged into our shared accounts to gather evidence of his withdrawals. Screenshots, printouts, everything. He might think he'd won, but I wasn't about to make it easy for him. As I drove home, the reality of the situation sank in. Our house, the one we'd spent years renovating together, felt like a stranger's. I walked through the door and was met with silence. Jack's belongings were gone, his absence tangible in the empty spaces where his presence used to be. But instead of breaking down, I took a deep breath and got to work. The locks needed changing, and I had no intention of letting him waltz back in whenever he pleased. By the time I collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion had set in, but so had a steely resolve. Jack had made his choice, and now I would make mine. The betrayal stung, but I wouldn't let it define me. My life wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter, one I planned to write on my own terms. The morning after Jack's departure, I woke up early, determined to take control of the situation. My first step was cutting off his access to the resources he'd so selfishly abused. Logging into our shared accounts, I canceled every credit card he had in his possession. The charges for a luxury hotel and spa, undoubtedly for his romantic getaway with Tiffany, flashed across the screen. I smiled grimly as I hit annul on the transactions, knowing they would soon be left scrambling to cover their lavish escape. Next, I called the credit card company to report the unauthorized charges. It felt empowering to take back even a shred of control. By the end of the call, their room was canceled, and their access to my financial contributions was officially cut off. Jack might have thought he had the upper hand, but he underestimated how far I was willing to go to protect myself. With that taken care of, I turned my attention to the legal battle ahead. I'd already consulted a lawyer weeks ago, suspecting this day might come, but now it was time to act. I scheduled an urgent meeting and gathered every piece of evidence I'd been collecting. Screenshots of Jack's text messages, photos he'd carelessly left on his phone of him and Tiffany, and records of his suspicious transactions. Everything was neatly compiled and ready to be used against him. At the lawyer's office, I felt a strange mix of vulnerability and determination. My lawyer listened intently as I recounted the events, assuring me that the evidence I'd collected would strengthen my case. Filing for divorce felt like drawing a line in the sand, a declaration that I wouldn't let him ruin me any further. By midday, Jack's reaction came through in the form of a barrage of angry text messages. The tone shifted rapidly from pleading to vitriol, his words dripping with desperation. He accused me of being heartless, of ruining his plans, and of trying to destroy him. It was almost laughable how quickly he played the victim, as if I were the one who'd betrayed our vows. I didn't respond. He wanted a reaction, but I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Every message he sent became another piece of evidence, further proof of his manipulative behavior. Despite his attempts to shake me, I stayed focused. The locks on the house had been changed, my finances were secure, and the legal process was in motion. Jack might have blindsided me with his betrayal, but he wouldn't catch me off guard again. If he thought I'd crumble under the weight of his actions, he was in for a rude awakening. As I prepared for the days ahead, I couldn't help but feel a spark of satisfaction. Jack had thrown the first punch, but I'd landed the first real blow. And I wasn't done yet. The fallout from my actions spread faster than I expected. By the next morning, I received a call from Margaret, Jack's mother. Her voice was sharp, accusatory, and laced with indignation. She wasted no time blaming me for everything, claiming I had been distant and inflexible, pushing Jack away. Her words stung, but I kept my composure. Instead of defending myself with empty platitudes, I simply read out loud some of Jack's messages. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Margaret's confidence wavered, and I could almost hear her reevaluating her son's version of events. She mumbled an excuse and hung up, leaving me with a bittersweet sense of vindication. As word of Jack's betrayal spread, my small community rallied around me. Many of my salon's clients, women I'd styled and bonded with over the years, came forward with words of encouragement. Some shared their own stories of heartbreak and resilience, turning the salon into a sanctuary of shared strength. One client, a regular who'd been coming to me for years, handed me a business card for a friend who specialized in family law. Another surprised me with an envelope of cash, insisting it was her way of helping me stay afloat. Their kindness was overwhelming, and for the first time since this ordeal began, I felt a spark of genuine hope. The support wasn't just emotional. My clients began spreading the word about my salon on social media, leaving glowing reviews and urging others to support me. New faces started walking through the door, curious to see what made my business so beloved. The increased revenue was a lifeline, ensuring I could cover the mortgage and other expenses Jack had recklessly abandoned. Each new appointment felt like a small victory, reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight. Meanwhile, Jack's problems were piling up. With no access to our joint finances and the luxury of a high-end hotel out of reach, he and Tiffany were forced to downgrade to a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. The stark contrast between their plans and their reality was almost comical. Tiffany, unable to resist the lure of social media, began posting sarcastic updates about their situation. Her captions were thinly veiled jabs at Jack's inability to provide the glamorous life she'd envisioned. In one particularly biting post, she uploaded a picture of their dingy motel room, complete with peeling wallpaper and a flickering light bulb, captioned, "Not quite the honeymoon suite I imagined." The posts went viral within our small circle, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. Jack's carefully constructed image was unraveling, and with each snarky update Tiffany shared, it became clear that their fairy tale was turning into a cautionary tale. I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. While I was busy rebuilding my life with dignity, Jack's choices were dragging him further into chaos. As the days passed, I found myself leaning into the support of those around me. My world, once upended, was slowly stabilizing, while Jack's was crumbling under the weight of his actions. I knew the battle wasn't over, but for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was winning. The day of the court hearing arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with a mix of nerves and determination. My lawyer, armed with the evidence I'd meticulously gathered, assured me we were prepared for whatever Jack might throw our way. As we sat down, I noticed Jack's confident smirk. It was the same expression he wore when he thought he held all the cards. But this time he was wrong. The proceedings began with the presentation of my evidence. The judge listened intently as my lawyer laid out the timeline of Jack's betrayal. The text messages, receipts, and bank statements painted a clear picture of his deceit. Each piece of evidence chipped away at the facade Jack had tried so hard to maintain. When the conversation shifted to the financial discrepancies, the courtroom grew quieter. The judge's stern expression said it all. Jack's lawyer attempted to counter by claiming he had a right to half of my salon. It was laughable, really. My business was my creation, built from years of hard work and long hours. Every penny invested in it had come from my savings and careful planning. My detailed financial records, painstakingly maintained, proved beyond doubt that Jack had never contributed a dime. The judge's line of questioning grew increasingly pointed as Jack's arguments unraveled. When it was Jack's turn to speak, his demeanor shifted. Gone was the smug confidence, replaced by a clumsy attempt at self-pity. He claimed he'd been forced to take drastic actions because he felt neglected in our marriage. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. His excuses sounded hollow, especially when juxtaposed with the evidence of his extravagant spending on Tiffany. The judge wasn't buying it. The climax of the hearing came when the judge delivered her ruling. Jack was ordered to return the money he'd taken from our joint account. More importantly, the court affirmed that my salon and our home were legally mine, classified as separate property due to my sole contributions. The relief was overwhelming. For the first time in months, I felt the weight of Jack's betrayal begin to lift. His attempts to disrupt my life had failed spectacularly. As the ruling was finalized, Jack's expression hardened. He avoided my gaze, clearly fuming at his defeat. I could only imagine the conversations he'd have with Tiffany after this, now that their grand plans were in shambles. Meanwhile, I walked out of the courtroom with my head held high, knowing I had fought for what was rightfully mine and won. This wasn't just a legal victory, it was a personal one. Jack had underestimated me, believing his actions would leave me powerless. Instead, I had emerged stronger, with my dignity and independence intact. The battle wasn't without its scars, but it was worth every moment to reclaim my life. The aftermath of the court ruling was swift and unforgiving for Jack. His family, already skeptical after hearing the evidence I presented in court, turned their backs on him entirely. Margaret, who had once been his staunchest supporter, refused to take his calls. The humiliation of being exposed for his betrayal and financial manipulations left him isolated, a pariah even among those closest to him. The ripple effect didn't stop there. Rumors about his behavior reached his workplace, prompting an internal investigation into his expense reports. It didn't take long for his employer to uncover discrepancies that led to his termination. In a matter of weeks, Jack's life, once so carefully curated, crumbled into chaos. As for Tiffany, the cracks in their relationship began to show almost immediately. The allure of rebellion and luxury quickly faded when faced with the reality of a shared existence in a rundown motel. Tiffany's sarcastic posts about their situation turned into bitter rants aimed squarely at Jack. Publicly airing their grievances only deepened the divide between them, and before long, she packed up her belongings and left. The relationship that had started with so much drama ended in silence, leaving Jack alone to pick up the pieces of his shattered life. Meanwhile, my life was transforming in ways I hadn't imagined. The surge of support from my clients and community gave me the confidence to take my business to the next level. With the funds I'd secured and the newfound freedom from Jack's shadow, I expanded my salon, opening a second location in a trendy part of town. The new boutique, designed with an elegant and modern aesthetic, quickly became a hotspot for locals. The success was overwhelming, not just financially, but emotionally. It was a tangible reminder of my resilience and the rewards of standing up for myself. As word of my story spread, it began to resonate beyond my local community. I was invited to speak at a business conference, where I shared the challenges I'd faced and the strategies that had helped me navigate them. Standing on that stage, I looked out at the sea of faces and felt a deep sense of purpose. My story wasn't just about overcoming betrayal. It was about the power of preparation, persistence, and the importance of surrounding yourself with a strong support network. One moment from the conference stood out to me. A young woman approached me afterward, tears in her eyes, and told me that my story had given her the courage to leave a toxic relationship. Her words stayed with me, a powerful reminder that our struggles can inspire others to find their strength. Back at home, my office became a sanctuary of sorts. On my desk, I kept a framed printout of Jack's text message, the one where he announced he was leaving. It wasn't a trophy or a reminder of pain, but a symbol of how far I'd come. That message, once a harbinger of despair, now served as proof of my resilience and determination. As the months turned into years, the final chapter of my journey unfolded. I opened a third salon, each one more successful than the last, and earned recognition for my contributions to the local business community. At an award ceremony, I was presented with a plaque for Entrepreneur of the Year. Holding it in my hands, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This wasn't just about financial success. It was about reclaiming my narrative and building a life that was truly my own. The culmination of my efforts came with the grand opening of a flagship salon, a sprawling space that combined beauty services with wellness offerings. It was a dream I'd had for years, now realized through hard work and perseverance. The opening event was packed, with friends, family, and loyal clients celebrating alongside me. Looking around, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for everyone who had supported me through the darkest times. Jack's life, from what little I heard, remained a cautionary tale. He'd moved to a smaller town, taking on odd jobs to make ends meet. The sharp contrast between our lives was undeniable, but I chose not to dwell on it. My focus was on the future, on continuing to grow and inspire others to fight for their happiness. In the end, my journey wasn't about Jack or his betrayal. It was about finding strength in adversity and using it to build something extraordinary. And as I stood in the middle of my new salon, surrounded by the life I'd created, I knew that the best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about thriving in the face of everything meant to break me.
Bye-bye.